While chaos ensues across college football and the landscape concerning the college football playoffs, Cincinnati stands strong at 12-0. They face maybe the toughest test of the season after Notre Dame, with, of course, Houston coming up in the American Conference Championship game. Got Steve Helwick on the line from Hustle Belt and Underdog Dynasty on SB Nation to help us run through it. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. Championship weekend's always a great time of the year, and I think this year has some of the best championship slate that we've had in a long time, and we're going to get possibly a compelling college football playoff with some new teams, with Clemson, Oklahoma, Ohio State seemingly out of the picture. So it's going to be chaotic.
So this Houston team, not a whole lot of people across the nation know a lot about them. We'll see them for the first time on Saturday, but they've won 11 consecutive games since that Texas Tech loss early. Maybe their best win, SMU, possibly East Carolina, much like Cincinnati, of course, on the other side. So catch us up on the Houston Cougars, and of course, Clayton Tune runs the show.
Yes, and Clayton Tune, how he plays correlates highly to how this offense does, and Clayton Tune played a lot of good football during the stretch of the season. I think he had about 192 straight throws without an interception, dating from the first week of October all the way until that Memphis game on a Friday night recently. So Clayton Tune he's taken care of the football really well ever since that 4-interception game against Texas Tech. And Houston's really a passing-based offense. While they have shown the ability to run the ball with their young back Alton McCaskill and his partner Tayson Henry, a Texas Tech transfer, it's really the passing game which has elevated Houston to the next level. Clayton Tune had another 300-yard, 4-touchdown game this weekend, and he's had multiple touchdowns in all but one game ever since the month of October started. And in that time span, he's only thrown 2 interceptions, which were in the Memphis game. So Tune has really elevated his play recently. I love the targets that they have on this team. Nathaniel Dell is the go-to. He's the guy that they always go to on third down. They can get him deep. They can get him short. He is great all over the field. Then their tight end, Christian Trahan's pretty reliable too. So Houston has a lot of targets that they bring to this passing game, but they're going up against one of the best secondaries in the entire country. Cincinnati has a lot of NFL talent in that secondary, led by Sauce Gardner, and the Bearcats have the third best passing defense in the entire nation. They allow fewer than 1 passing touchdown per game. They allow only 161 yards, and quarterbacks just haven't been able to really produce their regular numbers when going up against Cincinnati. So it's going to be a great challenge for Tune and the Houston offense.
Brian Cook, a tremendous player in that Cincinnati secondary, 80 tackles, 7 passes defensed. The total of 29 sacks, 17 picks is pretty staggering as well. Cincinnati on offense with Desmond Ridder running the show, 33 total touchdowns.
Yes, Desmond Ridder, I think he's been pretty improved this year. Compared to past years, he stayed a little more in the pocket this year. I mean, last year there were some games where Ridder would take over with his legs. Specifically, I remember that against SMU. But this year, Ridder's kept it out more in the air. And I like when Cincinnati does that, because I like when they take their deep shots, because that's how the offense gets going early. They did that against Miami, Ohio in the opener, and they won that game 49-14. They did it again against SMU, and they won that game 48-14. When Cincinnati is looking to be aggressive early and take deep shots, that's when they're at their best. And they have a lot of receivers that are able to burn man coverage and get past these zones and really find openings. Tyler Scott's one of them that goes a little underrated, while Alec Pierce is the main guy. He's probably an NFL talent receiver that is a viable deep threat for this Bearcats team. So when Cincinnati stays more aggressive through the air, I think that's when they're at their best. But also they have a very talented running back in Jerome Ford. He hasn't been able to get some of those 100-yard games recently, but we saw what Ford's potential was this year in that UCF game when I think he had 189 yards and 4 touchdowns in the first half alone. So Cincinnati can stay pretty multi-dimensional on offense. And although sometimes they're just not consistent, as we saw in the Tulsa and Navy game, when this team finds its footing, it's a very dangerous team and very hard to stop.
Well, Cincinnati got what a lot of people thought that they not necessarily needed, but would boost the resume. And that's a one-loss Houston team at the end of the season in the conference championship game. Desmond Ridder looking out for Marcus Jones. 5 picks for the Houston defense. Cougars at 11-1. Once again, Texas Tech, a loss to start the season, then 11 consecutive wins. Close ones against East Carolina and SMU. Cincinnati, of course, clearing that SMU hurdle a couple weeks ago in impressive fashion, 48-14. Cincinnati obviously has the one win against Notre Dame by 2 scores on the road. So that would be the one indicator that maybe they're clearly the better team here. What kind of shot do you give the Cougars?
It's tough. And a lot of these AAC championship games in the recent years, even if there's a team like 2017 UCF, 2018 UCF, or 2020 Cincinnati that goes into it undefeated, I think for all 4 of the last AAC championship games have featured a go-ahead score in the fourth quarter, and 3 of those 4 have featured a go-ahead score in the final 2 minutes or overtime. So these games always come down to the wire. 2017 UCF, probably the most famous undefeated team from the AAC in the college football playoff era. They had to take down Memphis in double overtime in their game. And 2018 UCF had to overcome a 17-point deficit without Mackenzie Milton to beat Memphis. And last year, 2020 Cincinnati, they were in a rainstorm game with Tulsa, came down to the wire, came down to a game-winning field goal. So these games have usually been pretty competitive, regardless if there's a significant favorite or not. So I think Houston provides a good challenge to Cincinnati because Houston has an incredible rushing defense. And I know Cincinnati likes to use a lot of Jerome Ford, but this Houston rushing defense is currently ranked 8th in the country. They're one of 8 teams to hold opponents to under 100 yards per game. And also they brand themselves a sack avenue because Houston has one of the best pass rushing units in the entire country. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on Desmond Ridder. There's only 2 teams, Oklahoma State and Pitt, which produce more sacks per game than this Houston team does. And most of that pressure is generated from the defensive line. There's 3-4 guys on this team that just consistently get sacks. Derek Parrish is the main one. Logan Hall from the defensive tackle position has done a lot of good work too. But they get a lot of pressure on quarterbacks, and Cincinnati's really going to have to overcome the difficulties that Houston's defense presents. And another name you mentioned was Marcus Jones. I don't know why he's not even being considered for Heisman right now because, one, the team's 11-1, and usually team success is correlated with what people view as a Heisman candidate. But also, Marcus Jones leads the country in interceptions. He had 5 in a 4-game stretch recently. And also, he's the only guy in the country to have 4 special teams touchdowns. He's had 2 kick return touchdowns, 2 punt return touchdowns, and he's electrifying every single time he gets the ball in his hands. So Marcus Jones is just a heck of a player that Cincinnati's going to have to watch for. They're going to have to kick it away from him on special teams because he can strike at any moment. So those are just some things that the Bearcats have to be wary of if they want to secure their college football playoff position, which it looks like if they win at the moment that they're probably in.